Tonight we're celebrating not only Canada's 35-year commitment to international development, but also about the incredible power of each of us, together making sustainable change. So really the power of one. Before we dive into this evening's journey, let's take a moment to appreciate the space that we're in. Isn't this a lovely building? First-timers? Anybody first-timers? First time, wonderful. Welcome, first-timers. So this is called the Center for Social Innovation. It's a really inspiring space to connect people, to bring people together. And I'm seeing some familiar faces from the symposium. Hi down there. Really an opportunity to come together and to collaborate. Partnerships, if you want to call it that, and that's everything that Cuso International is about, is that ecosystem of bringing people together. The venue is really around an opportunity to celebrate tonight, and I'm sorry I'm getting distracted by colleagues on the side. And we're really thrilled. We're thrilled to have our alumni here. We have civil society organizations. We have diaspora communities. I've invited THCC, the Toronto Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I'm not sure if you're here. I've also invited the Consulate General of Peru, Consulate General of Jamaica, AU 6th region. How many of you know that there's an African Union 6th region in Toronto in and of itself? So yeah, so we've got lots of stuff happening here in Canada and in Toronto. And so I would just like to thank you as partners, thank you as friends for being here tonight. It's not lost on us that you've got lots of opportunities to be elsewhere. I'd like to also acknowledge Global Affairs Canada for their partnership in building a better world together. And that is their theme this week, from February 2nd to February 8th, International Development Week, to celebrate. So I know many of you are here and you're probably saying, where are the food stations? What is this taste of the world? Don't worry, please. This is the first half of the programming. There's two parts. There's a second half, which will be Taste of the World. And I promise there'll be enough to share for everyone. And with that, I would like to, actually I'm not going to do this part because we've had some technical difficulties. I'll invite you to go to Instagram though. Global Affairs Canada put out a 35-year video, a very small video around International Development Week. There's no words, it's a lot of type, it's a bit long, so that's another reason I don't want you to get lost in the fray. But Instagram, Global Affairs Canada, International Development Week, and there's a video that you might enjoy kind of seeing the history. It kind of goes back to the rotary phone to today, so it's a little bit interesting there. Cuso International and our Canadian office is in Ottawa. So I know many of you here in Toronto know me, but it's a great opportunity to know who our leader is. And with that, it's a great opportunity to have Nicholas Moye, the CEO of Cuso International, share a few insights about alumni of the world, International Development Week, Cuso International, all that good stuff. So Nick, over to you.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for me. You can all hear me okay? Yeah, good. You know, it really is great to be here, and every time that we do have an event here, Tina, I'm just amazed at, first of all, the turnout and the great community that surrounds you and surrounds this space here. It's great to see familiar faces. You know, International Development Week, there are lots of activities around the country, and yet, for some reason, it's not known as well as it should be. International Development Week is something that's been around for 35 years. It's a chance for us to really celebrate the contributions that we can all make towards a better world. And Global Affairs Canada actually sort of coordinates us around a theme. And I think the theme was up here just a bit earlier, building better together.
Yeah, building a better world together.
Building a better world together. And you know, we actually do need to be thinking about that a lot these days. I think you've seen the news, you see how things are going around the world. Thinking about how we can work together to build a better world is essential. And I think it's actually very much, it comes down to the fundamentals of what international development is. It's about collaboration, it's about partnership, it's about thinking forward, it's about ambition for a better world. And I feel that very strongly, that we need to be investing in that better future together. I also find that that theme suits Cuso very well. But before I get to that, I think it's important to acknowledge that not everyone recognizes the kind of progress that has been done around the world. our news feeds are, I'm sure you found yourself doom scrolling at different times in recent weeks. There are a lot of terrible things out there. And there's a lot of inequality, and there are a lot of communities where there are great injustices underway. But international development has been part of contributing to tremendous progress around the world. And in recent decades, we've reached levels that never seen before, levels of access to universal education, levels of life expectancy, reduction in major diseases, and the impacts that those are having on people, literacy rates that have climbed around the world. These are all very positive things. And the international development spaces and actors and organizations and individuals that work in that have been championing for that progress. Canada's been a leader in international development in so many respects. As a country, we actually loom large on a map when you look at a map, but we, in fact, are relatively small as a population. And yet, as a country, we've been committed for decades to building a better world. And I can be proud of that as a Canadian. Canadians in the room can be proud of that. Those of you that aren't Canadian may be proud of it just by being here. And some of you I know are at the Humber College, for example. You're studying in this space. You've come here to study on these things. We have so much that we can contribute. And Cuso has been part of the journey of Canada's contributions to the world almost ever since the beginning. Cuso has been around for over 60 years. Cuso is an organization that is really focused on creating better opportunities for underserved groups. That's the short version of what we do. But Cuso really is about creating economic opportunities for those who need it. We do that, we focus on advancing and creating those opportunities while never letting go of our commitments to advance gender equality and champion climate action. We actually do a lot of things. We work in 19 countries, including in Canada's north. We have flagship programs that help girls in Ethiopia access post-secondary education. We have programs in Peru that champion women's rights and work with activists in changing the environment for themselves and for women in those spaces. We have programs to support gender mainstreaming and programming and policy across Caribbean countries. But we've developed a particular expertise around helping underserved communities access employment and long-term success in their jobs and their livelihoods. We've worked with migrants in Colombia that have come from Venezuela to help them access employment. We've worked with the private sector to improve their ways of working and be more inclusive. We've worked with communities that they otherwise wouldn't be working with. We've helped tens of thousands of migrants access employment. But we've done this really by focusing on the least served in community. And that's not an easy thing to do. But it was essential, and that program has now spread to Peru and to Ecuador. We're doing similar work in the Democratic Republic of the Congo as we help underserved communities access employment. It's an important part of what we do. I could talk at length about it, and you can pull me aside later about all the different things that we do. But there's some things that are pretty fundamental about international development that we don't talk enough about. It's actually really about collaboration. It's about partnership. It's about working with one another. Because you can't do anything alone. You can't really make change alone. You have to work with others. You also have to uplift those that you're working with. So it's about listening, understanding, collaborating, partnering with the initiative of those who are there. And so you don't import change. Change comes from within. And so we as an organization are deeply committed to partnership and collaboration. Cuso is not so much about going and doing. We're about engaging and supporting. And it's really fundamental to who we are and how we work. I'd say the other thing that really I have to elevate is people. So collaboration and partnership, and then people and relationship. Skills, trade, exchange, collaboration, relationships. Most of you probably know Cuso for something I haven't even said yet, which is volunteering. Cuso is known and has always been known for skilled volunteers. And I sometimes hesitate at the word volunteer. I think it's wonderful because it's the contribution of oneself. But I don't want to understate the level of skills that people bring to the table when they go on exchanges and placements with Cuso. There are currently over 100 Cuso volunteers overseas. There are dozens more that are volunteering locally. There are volunteers in Canada's north. There are 14,000 Canadians that have volunteered with Cuso over the years. We have some that are here and we're going to hear about today. And I'm really glad that we will be. Because this relationship and the way that volunteers engage is so critical. The relationships that they build last for ages. They build bridges and relationships, which matters just so incredibly deeply. You know, volunteering has evolved a lot over the years. Yes, we still send Canadians overseas, but we also support volunteering from one country to another. We also support national volunteering. Increasingly, volunteering involves diaspora returning home and engaging with their communities and where they come from. When I was in Ethiopia in October, I was meeting with the Dayton is a young woman, she's 24, Canadian, but of Ethiopian origin, and she really wanted to go back. She is really making a difference where she is, and she's translating between cultures in ways that any volunteer that goes overseas can. These relationships are deep. I was never placed with Cuso myself internationally, but I did do a placement early in my career with an organization called the Cody Institute. They sent me to Ethiopia and it changed my life. I had a placement with a women's rights organization called CK. I'm still very close to them. I was a tall white man with all of my privilege that discovered what these women were going through and the amazing work that they were doing to change the context that they knew. They were dealt a bad hand and they were changing that. I learned, I believe, more from them than they learned from me. I believe I contributed a bit. Those 6 months became 3 years. They wanted me around. I valued so much that experience. And those relationships are deep and they last. We were here not that long ago, actually. You can never, and the reason I'm going to bring up another story is because you never know what's going to come out of the relationships that emerge from these placements. There's one of the many alumni and volunteers that Cuso has. Stephanie Boyd went to Peru. She developed deep relationships with indigenous communities there. She ended up, because of her creativity and her knowledge of film, she ended up working on a film with the people there, the Karuara. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but Karuara river people. And really, the emergence of their work together has given voice and space to this story of the relationship of those indigenous people with their river that is threatened. And that relationship is deep. They've won awards for this. They're championing their rights in ways that, and sharing stories in ways that we couldn't have anticipated. So Cuso is known for all of those things. And we think that we can keep building a better world. And I do want to turn to talking about the many contributions that our volunteers make around the world. But I want to take a moment and a pause to acknowledge that I've actually been struggling a lot these last couple of weeks. I'm reading the news and I'm struggling because I already knew that aid was in trouble around the world. I already knew that France, that Germany, that the Netherlands, that the Sweden, that the British had cut aid. In the last 2 weeks, the US has frozen international assistance. They have this week been dismantling USAID. And while Cuso doesn't receive direct money from USAID, they are accountable for 40% of the world's global assistance, which was never enough to start with. So I just want to recognize here in this room that if we're all global citizens that believe in making the world a better place, increasingly we have to ask ourselves, how can we make sure that we keep building that we will find ways to push back, to preserve the spaces and do more. So in this moment of trial, relationship, collaboration, partnership will be more important than ever. I don't have the answers. I just know how important it is for us to act. And it's why I do have a call to action to you. You know, I always would encourage, and you're doing it by being here, that you be informed. But I encourage you to consider volunteering with Cuso. I can't not make that plea. There are always postings on our website. You can absolutely and easily find what those are. And really, we're looking for people with skills that want to share. And you can talk to Tina, to myself, to many at Cuso if you're interested in those. I want to encourage you to advocate. We are going into an election later this year. Let your elected officials know that you care about international development. There are many, many ways that you can do that. just show them that you care. Show them that you've come to an event like this. Use social media, volunteer in election campaigns, tell the candidates that you care about this. Really encourage that you do that, because they don't hear enough about it. I often hear politicians tell me, well, nobody talks to us about international development, so we're not going to focus on that. So it's really up to us to make sure that they hear us. And thirdly, I really want to encourage you to support organizations that work in this space directly. Obviously, I'd love you to support Cuso, and many of you probably already do, and I thank you for that. But any organization that works in this space, they need your help, they need your support. So it's really important that we all be there for one another. I'm just always thrilled to be here at events like this. I draw so much from you and the engagements that we're going to have. I'm looking forward to hearing from those that have gone through the Cuso journey, each in their own ways, because I know that you're going to have a lot to share for us. And finally, I'll just thank you and thank Tina for organizing all of this.
Why I do this job is I'm a public engagement officer and I have partnerships in my title. But there's some of you in this room, and as Nick shared a personal story, I'll share a personal one as well. I don't come from this sector. This is my second career, and it's my second career because I did do a volunteer placement, and it blew my heart away to say, how can I make this my life? So with that, I think partnerships, particularly with we've got Ethiofidel here, one of our Ethiopian partners. Diaspora is a real key passion as well, just having that opportunity to have that connection to the land. So thank you, Nick, for being here, I see you now, and sharing a bit of a personal lens on your trajectory through international development. And, you know, I hope that everyone here has that kernelling, this catalyst, this little bit of a fire that's starting to burn to say, how can I also be, you know, part of this community? You are part, you're here, but I know there's many of you who are thinking about volunteering, and this is the space that you have that opportunity to find out more. Can I just, by a show of hands, have our alumni put up their hand, if they're able to? Okay, just at the back as well. Yeah. Keep them up, just so that the others can actually see who they might want to connect with and get those real lifelong personal journey stories. May Chow was a volunteer in Tanzania, and she was a marketing and communications advisor. We have Michelle Davis, who is also here. She's an independent entrepreneur, so I know how precious your time is, and I appreciate it. Michelle was a market researcher within the Caribbean diaspora communities, and also a volunteer in Jamaica. We have Alejandra Kale, did I pronounce that right? And Alejandra was also in marketing and communications in Peru. And we have my dear friend, I'm Blind Tibin. I'm Blind has done 2 volunteer placements with us, and I'm sure he's thinking about his third. I'm Blind was in Nigeria as well as in Cameroon. And they're all going to share different lenses of their own personal experience. I'm not going to do the talking. I'm going to ask 6 people to put up their hand.
Do we know about putting our hand?
Hi everyone, so my name is Michelle. My placement was in Tanzania. I was in the economic capital of Dar es Salaam, and I worked for the Tanzania Women Chamber of Commerce as a marketing communications advisor.
Can you turn up the sound, please?
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Davis. So I was placed in Jamaica 2001 to 2003, so a little while ago. I was a research assistant at the Institute for Gender and Development Studies at the University of West.
Hi everyone, my name is Alejandra Calle. I was placed in Peru, Lima, between 2018 and 2020, right before COVID. I was a communications advisor with a local organization called MOTIC. They focused on climate change and just social movement support. And I worked with the PAU project, which was the Peri-Urban and Urban Agriculture Project in Lima.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Blind Tibin. I currently am a program manager with the MCCSS, UCSD and SSH, Special Program for Children with Disabilities. I volunteered twice with Cuso. I volunteered first time was in Cameroon, and I worked in a school called l'Atelier de la Sapience. Et on dit ça en français. I was helping them balance out their curriculum, integrating some more extracurricular activities for the young people, and engaging them with different activities so that they could be more engaged in school. So I was doing that, and then after I was in Nigeria, we were in Calabar, and I was also doing youth engagement as well. I ended up being in Ogoja, which is more like a village, and we were helping them with the youth centers where the youth were getting training, youth who were out of school, getting training, whether academic training to get their businesses going, and just giving them assets so that they would be successful.
Okay, first question? Oh, no, sorry. Can somebody pass her a mic? Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Malvika Karpal. My pronouns are she, her, and I hope to be a future volunteer with Cuso. The question is, what initially sparked your interest in international volunteerism, and how did Cuso International stand out among other organizations?
I can go ahead. So I think it's very important in this world. We're all global citizens. There are things which we can do in Canada, things we can do overseas. I grew up in different places in the world, including Switzerland and Sierra Leone, so I understand that there's a movement towards sharing knowledge and assets with different parts of the world. And I just wanted to make sure that I was able to make a contribution to these two countries which I went to, and to get a contribution back. So it was reciprocity. It was very reciprocal. I still have integrated my relationships with all the youth I was working with, support them along the way. And Cuso stood out to me because the approach was more an approach whereby which we win together, right? And I was trying to have that approach. We learn together and integrate, and we really have a modus operandi that focuses on not us dictating, but us listening carefully, understanding, and trying to implement and contribute our talents into the mosaic of talents that are already there. I know in Nigeria and Cameroon I was working with very, very expert professionals who were doing a wonderful job, and I felt quite supported. And I think that's the most important, the Cuso having boots on the ground, whether it's Cuso Nigeria or Cuso Cameroon at the point, with lots of professionals, people who are making things happen, and you're just going to contribute your little grain of salt into that whole salt shaker.
I think for me, initially it was part of the master's program that I was doing. So my master's was practice-based from Waterloo. And so initially I volunteered for 3 months in Peru as well, but I was based in Pucallpa, which was in the Amazon region, and I liked my experience there very much, to the point where like I knew that 3 months was not enough. Usually they tell you that like 3 months is how long it takes you to kind of adapt to the organization, your environment, and to kind of understand what your role is. So then coming back, I needed to finish my master's, and then I found through more research I wanted to go back to Peru, and Cuso was one of the few organizations that were still working in Latin America. So there's a lot of organizations that were moving away from Latin America, and being from there for me was very important to also contribute to a region that matters for me, and it's like very it was very personal as well, like what I can do to give back. So seeing that Cuso was working there in Peru, in Lima, and then they offered long-term contracts for me was very important, because that for me showed that it was a lot more meaningful, I think, what I could do within that time period. And so yeah, I applied and I ended up going back, and it was as fulfilling or more than what I could have anticipated, to the point where like I also ended up extending my contract to see the completion of the project that I was working in, which for me became very important to kind of see the whole thing through. And then Cuso itself, as an organization, I saw that they were very well respected as well by the communities and by the groups that they were working with. I feel like there was a lot of mutual cooperation. a lot of communication as well, understanding what the partners needed and what Cuso also like what they could provide. So I really did appreciate the fact that they were there to listen to what the community or the organizations and what they needed. And yeah, I feel like the mutual respect was very, very meaningful as well, because it's like once you see other organizations and how they work, you learn to respect that and to really value that reputation that they have. So that to me made a huge difference.
So for me, like volunteering has been, I'm a lifelong volunteer. So recently my partner said, you volunteer too much. You're running a business, you can't always be volunteering. So, but that started as a child. So my parents have always been volunteers. My mom volunteers, very active in her church. My dad was a volunteer coach with Little League of baseball for over 30 years when we were kids until we were older. So I just saw. So it was very natural for us, my siblings and I, to have this orientation or desire to volunteer. When I was at U of T doing my undergraduate studies, and as I was graduating, I'm like, I kind of had enough. I need a break, I need a change. And maybe that was really because of all the racism that I experienced as a Black young person growing up in Toronto. So in my classes, I could go the whole week on campus, no one would talk to me. I was in sciences, so that was even another layer to it, or in stores and security would follow me around, or no one would sit beside me on the train. So I felt a little bit tired of that. So I was able to participate in a youth international internship program. So I went to the Eastern Caribbean on a 6-month placement that ended up being extended for a year. And once I got there, the first change that I noticed in myself was that I smiled a lot more. And that was because I didn't have the burden of racism to deal with. I was in a country where everyone looked like me, from the Prime Minister down to the courier person, the cleaner, and so that lifted that off my shoulders. So I spent a year there, and then I learned of a graduate program at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. So I decided to apply to that. It was in Gender and International Development Studies, and it was an incredible experience. I feel that I understood my parents a lot better, having been in Jamaica, where they are from, as well as studying gender and gender equality. And so when I was there, the opportunity came up for my department who wanted to hire me, and it was through a Cuso International placement. So that's when I first started learning about Cuso. And I was able to, that was when Cuso had an office here in Toronto. So I was able to meet some of the staff, and that kind of cemented it for me. So yeah, so I'm starting to understand Cuso's model of how they did their work. So these longer placements in working in solidarity and partnership with local communities and local community agencies, but meeting folks like Fatty, who was here at that time, and some of the other people who were here. It just, it felt like we were just kindred spirits. We just understood each other, the commitment that it was, we're not going kind of interrupting or questioning the colonial model and colonial projects in the global south, and being connected with people who understood that orientation that I was coming with, that understanding that I was coming as a Black woman into international development work, because at that time there weren't many people who looked like me. And so then also being able to meet the Cuso staff in Jamaica. Dorothy Hollingsworth was the program director at the time, and it felt right. It felt like a right fit for me. So yes, I completed my 2-year placement, and it was just absolutely wonderful. I had a fantastic experience doing work that I thought was, and I felt was very meaningful.
So I have a slightly different story, and I appreciate the stories from here. I became interested in international volunteering a couple of years ago. I came from a marketing communications background in corporate Toronto, and I felt that I could really use my skills elsewhere, and I wanted to have an impact on a global scale. And so when my friends recommended Cuso, I started looking into it. I was first interested because the projects with Indigenous relations and community-led development projects was something that I thought that was really important. And so I looked into it further and then decided to take the plunge. So I actually came back for my placement just 2 months ago. So I'm still really missing the work of Tanzania. And I also extended my time from 6 months to 9 months because it was just not enough time. And there really was a sense of, I found a place where I can kind of complete my personal journey and still give back in terms of skills-based volunteering. And that was, it's caused a huge change for my personal life and something that I value very much. And I hope to continue in my professional career and personal life going forward. Personal achievements was with one of the members of my NGO. And so I was working for Tanzanian Women Chamber of Commerce. It's an organization that helps women, business leaders, and youth entrepreneurs all across Tanzania mainland as well as Zanzibar. The membership is about 12,000 people. And sometimes when you're working with an organization that touches that many, you really don't see the members directly, which means that every interaction that we have with members was valuable. One of the members was a long-standing TWCC member, and she owned a farm in a southeastern region of Tanzania. She took me and my colleague over the weekend to go see this farm, learn about what she does, and I got to meet the farmers, and during that time I also learned about her experience. She was really incredible. She taught me all about Tanzania's history, economy, the political state, and the perspectives of people in the country. And she also brought Wi-Fi to the economic capital in the 90s. And so I really got to understand her perspective and what she was trying to do with the farm. And when we got there, I understood how much impact that she had to the farmers and the entire community. The farmers themselves talked to us about their issues with food shortage, dangerous wildlife causing security concerns, sanitation, low pay, just labor conditions. And it really showed me that what we're trying to do was provide this member with every tool and resource that she needed in order to address this as best as she could.
On a research project with UN Women, so I was one of the research associates working on the project. So I was collecting data in Jamaica, the Bahamas, and Antigua. So, and it was on women's transformational leadership across the Caribbean. So it was a fantastic project. And what comes to mind is the interview I did with at one particular organization. So the name of the organization is Children's First. So I worked with a lot of children who were homeless, underhoused, very low resource households. So as a Cuso cooperator, you take public transit. So I took the bus from Kingston into Spanish Town, the old capital. And, it was a nice day. I was in very good spirits. So I remember, walking and swinging. I was in a really good mood. So we get to Children's First, I was doing the interview. So I started with the focus group with the young people. One of them said, when I told my friends that I was coming to this program at this part of town, they were like, why? It's like so violent, it's so unsafe. I'm like, and then some of the young kids in the group were like, yeah, people said the same thing. Yeah, it's really rough, it's really bad. And then I interviewed the executive director afterward, and she was like, oh yeah, this is a really rough area of town. So I was just, you're from Canada, even though I'm Jamaican background, I don't know all the inner workings of all the inner city communities. So the next day I went back to my place and I was talking with some of my colleagues and I was telling them this. And they're like, you did what? You took the bus to where? That prison? Oh, well, that's really dangerous that you did that. But for me, you always see the good in people, and it was such a fantastic interview that I was able to complete. But sometimes you're not always thinking about that people experience things in different ways than you, right? You're there as someone who's not as familiar with the communities and things that they would see as barriers. I saw them as opportunities. So sometimes I would think that, if my parents ever knew that I was doing in these areas by myself as a foreigner, but I was always safe. I never had an incident and never had an issue. That sticks out for me as one of the incidents where someone said, oh, they look at you, Michelle, and they just think you're so innocent, you're so clueless that you don't understand what's happening. But I was able to have such a great experience in not only in that research project, but many of the projects that I worked on that led to me continuing to do research to this day and specializing in mixed methods and qualitative research methodologies. And also because I'm able to really earn the trust of people through research and able to allow people to tell their stories in their voices. So these are...
It was a series of smaller, like, not small actually, they were pretty big events, but it was like 3 or 4 where basically if you're not familiar with Lima is in the middle of a desert. So it's very dry, it's a desert. So once you're in the city, when you're in the core, like you don't really see it, but once you start stepping outside of like, you know, like the center of the town, like where the touristy places are, you really see huge dunes, like the city is completely surrounded. And most of our work was actually in this like edge districts to support the urban agricultural groups that had got together. So people from the community, from a neighborhood, to create a community garden. So you would see this like desert, like a very bright green spot, and you would know like that's the community garden. And it was really beautiful, but again, because we were working on the outskirts of the city, they were very separate from each other. So for me, one of the biggest kind of like aha moments, and also part of like an existential crisis of, oh, you're working in this project, you're putting so much time and effort into it, what happens when you leave? Like what's you know, like what's the meaning of behind, like of everything that you're doing, what are you doing it for? So part of the project, so one of the activities that we wanted to do was get groups, like all of these groups that we were working with from the south, the east and the north together, so then they could share the knowledge with each other, because all of them had different types of crops and different kind of like aspects to each of their projects. For example, some ladies worked a lot with composting and composting with worms. So that they could share, you know, their experiences and their knowledge with each other, because otherwise they don't really connect. Even though they're in the same city, you know, like obviously they're busy, they have their own lives, and you don't really go to a district to look for a community garden to just share experiences. So being able to get all of these groups that we're working with together, we organized 3 different events, like one in the north, so we would grab the groups from the south and the east to go to the north, and they could see the different crops, and then grab the north and south to go to the east, and then like the same thing for the south. For me, it was that opportunity to kind of bridge this physical gap of them not knowing what everyone else was also up to, and sharing their knowledge, sharing seeds, sharing, you know, like their own products that they would be working on, and like all of the effort and all of the things that they were very proud of doing. It was like a whole day kind of activity where we have a lot of sharing, a lot of touring the different gardens, and just learning from each other. And then fast forward a few years later, knowing that they still keep in touch with each other, that they're still, you know, sharing the knowledge, sharing seeds with each other, and in times of hardship, because it is also a desert, you know, sometimes like the water runs out in the district, so then they have already kind of tied relationships with the ministry of their own districts, so they get extra support to be able to keep going with their projects.
Those volunteering bits which I did was, I'm very passionate about decolonizing the African mind and enabling us to tell our history from our perspective. So when I traveled to both Cameroon and Nigeria, I had my book, which I have here today as well, whereby which I have every day of the year we celebrate an African ancestor, and from antiquity to contemporary ancestors like Muhammad Ali. So I was able to put that into the curriculum in the school and also make it available in the youth centers on the computers, because every once in a while they don't have internet access, every once in a while they don't have power, every once in a while things happen. So they were able to use this tool, and up until today they're using this tool just to give a little, you know, insights and information on greatness in African greatness to the youth, which is very empowering to them. So for me, that was very meaningful, very significant. I felt I was making somewhat of a difference in the youth's life. We had lots of workshops, you know, whether it was slams, whether it was poetry, where we used the tools which I had brought to them so that they could implement, you know, different things, and also that they could understand different things about the global perspective on the Afrocentricity. So for me, it was very empowering to me, and hopefully empowering to them, but they continually use that.
I do martial arts. I ended up, as a side note, doing a martial arts class for young girls, a women empowerment group, when I was in Nigeria. So it was very empowering because the young girls sometimes have been told, no, martial arts are not for you, you shouldn't be doing it. But I had very enthusiastic young girls who came, and they came week in, week out, and they trained, and they got themselves jacked, so that, you know, in the future, that some people might hesitate to step to them the wrong way. So it was very empowering for me to do that, and I really enjoyed that interaction as well.
Michelle. And thank you, Alejandra. I actually was carried into my own experiences by listening to you. What amazing advocates you are for global solidarity and for just the experiences that you've had. I don't think we could have had better speakers to carry us forward into what contributions we can make in the world. And you said it, Michelle, think globally, act locally. There's so many ways to act, but it's all about relationship. And, you know, I find that my work is often so cerebral, big global changes and how we can tackle inequality, and ultimately it all comes down to the relationships that we have. And I just want to thank you for sharing your experiences and continuing to do that. It really is a life-changing experience. I want to just thank you for taking the time for sharing that.
The Ontario Council, I see you want to just put up your hand. Another fine institution that Cuso International is a. So we've got 3 local food vendors. Discover the vibrant flavors of East Africa at La Vigan, specializing in plant-based Ethiopian and Eritrean dishes. Their menu features hearty stews, fresh salads, and flavorful sauces from organically sustainable sourced ingredients. Guests love their warm hospitality, stunning presentation, and unforgettable flavors. Perfect for vegans and anyone seeking a unique culinary adventure. And I believe the volunteers are already in the room. You're going to be served. This is sampling. So I do encourage you to sample the different stations. If I can ask somebody to open up those curtains, because then you'll be able to see the different food stations.